ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। Namaskar, my dear friends. This is video number 57 on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna Parmahamsa. This video starts with chapter number 52 after the passing away. Sri Ramakrishna passed away on Sunday, August 15, 1886, plunging his devotees and disciples into a sea of grief. They were like men in a shipwreck, but a strong bond of love held them together, and they found assurance and grace in each other's company. They could not enjoy the friendship of worldly people and would talk only of their Master. Shall we not behold him again? This was the one theme of their thought and the one dream of their sleep. Alone they wept for him, walking in the streets of Calcutta. They were engrossed in the thought of him. The Master had once said to M, "It becomes difficult for me to give up the body when I realize that after my death you will wander about weeping for me." Some of them thought, "He is no longer in this world. How surprising that we still enjoy living. We could give up our bodies if we liked, but still we do not." Time and again Sri Ramakrishna had told them that God reveals himself to his devotees if they yearn for him and call him with whole-souled devotion. He had assured them that God listens to the prayer of a sincere heart. The young unmarried disciples of the Master who belonged to his inner circle had attended on him day and night at the Kasipur garden house. After his passing away, most of them returned to their families against their own wills. They had not yet formally renounced the world. For a short while they kept their family names, but Sri Ramakrishna had made them renounce the world mentally. He himself had initiated several of them into the monastic life, giving them the ochre cloth of sannyasis. Badanagar Monastery. Two or three of the master's attendants had no place to go. To them the large-hearted Surendra said, "Brothers, where will you go? Let us rent a house. You will live there and make it our master's shrine, and we householders shall come there for consolation. How can we pass all our days and nights with our wives and children in the world? I used to spend a sum of money for the master at Kasipur. I shall gladly give it now for your expenses." Accordingly, he rented a house for them at Badanagar in the suburbs of Calcutta, and this place became gradually transformed into mutt or monastery. For the first few months, Surendra contributed 30 rupees a month. As the other members joined the monastery one by one, he doubled his contribution, which he later increased to 100 rupees. The monthly rent for the house was 11 rupees. The cook received 6 rupees a month. The rest was spent for food. First member. The younger Gopal brought the master's bed and other articles of daily use from the garden house at Kasipur. The Brahmin who had been cook at Kasipur was engaged for the new monastery. The first permanent member was the elder Gopal. Sarath spent the nights there. In the beginning, Sarath, Sasi, Baburam, Niranjan, and Kali used to visit the monastery every now and then according to their convenience. Tarak, who had gone to Vrindavan following the master's death, returned to Calcutta after a few months and soon became a permanent member of the monastery. Rakhal, Jogin, Latu, and Kali were living at Vrindavan with the Holy Mother when the monastery was started. Kali returned to Calcutta within a month, Rakhal after a few months, and Jogin and Latu after a year. The householder devotees frequently visited the monastic brothers and spent hours with them in meditation and study. After a short time, Narendra, Rakhal, Niranjan, Surat, Sasi, Baburam, Jogin, Tarak, Kali, and Latu renounced the world for good. Sharda, Prasanna, and Subodh joined them some time later. Gangadhar, who was very much attached to Narendra, visited the mutt regularly. It was he who taught the brothers the hymn sung at the evening service in the Shiva temple at Banaras. He had gone to Tibet to practice austerity. Now, having returned, he lived at the monastery. Hari and Tulsi at first only visit, visitors at the monastery soon embraced the monastic life and thus completed the list of the master's sannyasi disciples. Surendra's magnanimity. Surendra was indeed a blessed soul. It was he who laid the foundation of the great order later associated with Sri Ramakrishna's name. His devotion and sacrifice made it possible for those earnest souls to renounce the world for the realization of God. Through him, Sri Ramakrishna made it possible for them to live in the world as embodiments of his teaching. The renunciation of woman and gold and the realization of God. The brothers lived at the mutt like orphan boys. Sometimes they would not have the money to pay their house rent. Sometimes they would have no food in the monastery. Surendra would come and settle all these things. He was the big brother of the monks. Later on, when they thought of his genuine love, the members of this first mutt shed tears of gratitude. Ascetic zeal of the young sannyasis. The new monastery became known among the master's devotees as the Badanagar Mutt. Narendra, Rakhal, and the other young disciples were filled with intense renunciation. One day, Rakhal's father came to the mutt and asked Rakhal to return home. Why do you take the trouble to come here? Rakhal said to him, I am very happy here. Please pray to God that you may forget me and that I may forget you too. The young disciples said to each other, we shall never return to the worldly life. The Master enjoined upon us the renunciation of woman and gold. How can we go back to our families? Sasi had taken charge of the daily worship in the mutt. The master's relics had been brought from Balram's house, and Sri Ramakrishna was worshipped daily in the worship hall. Narendra supervised the household. He was the leader of the monastery. He would often tell his brother disciples the selfless actions enjoined in the Gita are worship, japa, meditation, and so on, and not worldly duties. The brothers at the mutt depended on him for their spiritual inspiration. He said to them, "We must practice sadhana, otherwise, we shall not be able to realize God." He and his brother disciples, filled with an ascetic spirit, devoted themselves day and night to the practice of spiritual discipline. Their one goal in life was the realization of God. They followed to their hearts content the injunctions prescribed in the Vedas, Puranas, and Tantras for an ascetic life. They spent their time in japa and meditation and study of the scriptures. Whenever they would fail to experience the divine presence, they would feel as if they were on the rack. They would practice austerity, sometimes alone under trees, sometimes in a cremation ground, sometimes on the bank of the Ganges. Again, sometimes they would spend the entire day in the meditation room of the monastery in japa and contemplation. Sometimes they would gather to sing and dance in a rapture of delight. All of them, and Narendra particularly, were consumed with the desire to see God. Now and then they would say to each other, "Shall we not starve ourselves to death to see God?" Monday, February 21, 1887. Narendra, Rakhal, Niranjan, Sarat, Sasi, Kali, Baburam, Tarak, and Sarda Prasanna were living in the monastery. All day the members had been fasting in observance of the Shivratri. Sarat, Kali, Niranjan, and Sarda were planning to go to Puri the following Saturday on a pilgrimage to the sacred Jagannath. Jogan and Latu were at Vrindavan and had not yet seen the new place. Narendra had gone to Calcutta that morning to look up a lawsuit in which his family had been involved since the death of his father. At 9 o'clock in the morning, M arrived at the mutt. Tarak saw him and began to sing in praise of Shiva. Rahul joined him. There Shiva dances, striking both his cheeks, and they resound ba ba boran, dimmy dimmy dimmy. Sounds his drum. A garland of skulls from his neck is hanging. In his matted locks the Ganges hisses. Fire shoots from his mighty trident. Round his waist a serpent glitters, and on his brow the moon is shining. Rakhal and Tarak danced as they sang. Narendra had recently composed the song. Sasi finished the morning worship in the shrine. Sharath then sang about Shiva to the accompaniment of the Tanpura. Narendra had just arrived from Calcutta. He had not yet taken his bath. Kali asked him, "What about the lawsuit? Why should you bother about it?" Narendra replied sharply, "Renunciation of woman and gold.
Narendra was smoking and talking to him and the others. He said, nothing can be achieved in spiritual life without the renunciation of woman and gold. Woman is the doorway to hell. All people are under the control of woman. The cases of Shiva and Krishna are quite different. Shiva turned his consort into his servant. Sri Krishna no doubt led a householder's life, but how unattached he was. How quickly he renounced Vrindavan and the Gopis, Rakhal, and how he renounced Dwarka too, where he was king. Narendra took his bath in the Ganges and returned to the monastery. He carried his wet cloth and towel in his hand. Sharda prostrated himself before Narendra. He too had been fasting on account of the Sivaratri. He was going to the Ganges for his bath. Narendra entered the worship room and prostrated himself before the picture of Sri Ramakrishna, who was daily worshipped there as the deity. For a few minutes he was absorbed in meditation. The devotees assembled in a room and began to converse. The talk turned to Bhavanath. Narendra said people like him live like worms in the world. Shiva festival at the Mutt. It was afternoon. Arrangements were being made to worship Shiva. In the evening, leaves of the bale tree were gathered for the worship. Bale wood was chopped for the homa. In the evening, Sasi, who was in charge of the worship at the monastery, burnt incense before the pictures of the various gods and goddesses. The worship of Shiva was to take place under the bale tree in the monastery compound. The deity was to be worshipped 4 times during the 4 watches of the night. The brothers assembled under the bale tree. Bhupati and M were present also. One of the young members of the Mutt was in charge of the worship. Kali was reading from the Gita. Now and then he argued with Narendra. Kali, I alone am everything. I create, preserve, and destroy. Narendra, how is it possible for me to create? Another power creates through me. Our various actions, even our thoughts, are caused by that power. M to himself. The master used to say, as long as a man feels that it is he who meditates, he is under the jurisdiction of the Adya Shakti, must be acknowledged. Kali reflected in silence a few moments and then said, the actions you are talking about are illusory. There is not even any such thing as thought. The very idea of these things makes me laugh. Narendra, the I that is implied in I am he, is not this ego, it is that which remains after one eliminates mind, body, and so on. After completing the recital of Gita, Kali chanted Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Narendra and the other devotees stood up and circled round and round the tree, singing and dancing. Now and then they chanted in chorus Shiva Guru, Shiva Guru. It was midnight, the 14th day of the dark fortnight of the moon. Pitch darkness filled All the quarters, men, birds, and animals all hushed into silence. The young sannyasis were clad in Girva robes. The words Shiva Guru chanted in their full-throated voices rose into the infinite sky like the rumbling of rain clouds and disappeared in the indivisible Satchitananda. The worship was over. The sun about to rise was painting the eastern horizon crimson. In this sacred twilight, the conjunction of night and day, the holy Brahmurta, the young worshippers finished their bath in the Ganges. It was morning. The devotees went to the shrine room, prostrated themselves before the deity, and gracefully assembled in the big hall. Narendra was clad in a new ochre cloth. The bright orange color of his apparel blended with the celestial luster of his face and body, every pore of which radiated a divine light. His countenance was filled with fiery brilliance and yet touched with the tenderness of love. He appeared to all as a bubble that had risen up in the ocean of absolute existence and bliss and assumed a human body to help in the propagation of his master's message. All eyes were fixed on him. Narendra was then just 24 years old, the very age at which the great Chaitanya had renounced the world. Balram had sent fruit and sweets to the monastery for the devotees' breakfast. Rahal, Narendra, and a few others partook of the refreshments. After eating one or two morsels, some of them cried out, "Blessed indeed is Balram!" All laughed. Narendra now began to joke like a child. He was imitating Sri Ramakrishna. He put a sweet into his mouth and stood still as if in samadhi. His eyes remained unwinking. A devotee stepped forward and pretended to hold him up by the hand lest he should drop to the ground. Narendra closed his eyes a few minutes later with the sweetmeat still in his mouth. He opened his eyes and drawled out, "I am all right," or laughed loudly. Refreshments were now given to everyone. M looked on at this wonderful mart of happiness. The devotees shouted joyfully, "Jai Guru Maharaj." Monday, March 25, 1887, M arrived at the Badanagar Math to visit his brother disciples. Devendra accompanied him. M had been coming to the monastery very frequently and now and then had spent a day or two. The previous week he had spent 3 days at the mutt. He was very eager to observe the spirit of intense renunciation of these young men. It was evening. M intended to spend the night in the monastery. Sasi lighted the lamp in the worship room and chanted the name of God. Next, he burnt incense before all the pictures of gods and goddesses in the various rooms. The evening service began. Sasi conducted the worship. The members of the mutt with M and Devendra stood with folded hands and sang the hymn of the Aarti. Narendra's reminiscences of the master. When the worship was over, Narendra and M became engaged in conversation. Narendra was recalling his various meetings with Sri Ramakrishna. Narendra, one day during one of my early visits, the master in an ecstatic mood said to me, "You have come. How amazing!" I said to myself. It is as if he had known me a long time. Then he said to me, "Do you ever see light?" I replied, "Yes, sir. Before I fall asleep, I feel something like a light revolving near my forehead. Do you see it even now?" Narendra, I used to see it frequently. In Jadoo Malik's garden house, the master one day touched me and muttered something to himself. I became unconscious. The effect of the touch lingered with me a month like an intoxication. When he heard that a proposal had been made about my marriage, he wept, holding the feet of the image of Kali. With tears in his eyes, he prayed to the Divine Mother, "O Mother, please upset the whole thing. Don't let Narendra be drowned." After my father's death, my mother and my brothers were starving. When the master met Annada Guha one day, he said to him, "Narendra's father has died. His family is in a state of great privation. It would be good if his friends helped him now with money." After Anada had left, I scolded him. I said, "Why did you say all those things to him?" Thus rebuked, he wept and said, "Alas, for your sake I could beg from door to door. He tamed us by his love. Don't you think so?" There is not the slightest doubt about it. His love was utterly unselfish. Narendra, one day when I was along with him, he said something to me. Nobody else was present. Please don't repeat it to anyone here. No, I shall not. What did he say? Narendra, he said, "It is not possible for me to exercise occult powers, but I shall do so through you. What do you say?" "No," I replied, "you can't do that." I used to laugh at his words. "You must have heard all these things from him." I told him that his visions of God were all hallucinations of his mind. He said to me, "I used to climb to the roof of the kuti and cry, 'O devotees, where are you all? Come to me. O devotees, I am about to die. I shall certainly die if I do not see you." And the Divine Mother told me, "The devotees will come." You see, everything is turned out to be true. What else could I say? I kept quiet. One day he closed the door of his room and said to Devendra Babu and Grace Babu, referring to me, "He will not keep his body if he is told who he is." Yes, we have heard that. Many a time he repeated the same thing to us too. Once you came to know about your true self in Nirvikalpa Samadhi at the Kasipur garden house. Is not that true? Narendra, yes, in that experience I felt that I had no body. I could see only my face. The master was in the upstairs room. I had that experience downstairs. I was weeping. I said, "What has happened to me?" The elder Gopal went to the master's room and said, Narendra is crying. When I saw the master, he said to me, now you have known, but I am going to keep the key with me. I said to him, what is that happened to me? Turning to the devotees, he said, he will not keep his body if he knows who he is. But I have put a veil over his eyes. One day he said to me, you can see Krishna in your heart if you want. I replied, I do not believe in Krishna or any such nonsense. Both M and Narendra laughed. Narendra's foreknowledge of things. I have noticed a peculiar thing. Some men, objects, or places make me feel as if I had seen them before in a previous birth. They appear familiar to me. One day I went to Surat's house in Calcutta on Amherst Street. Immediately I said to Surat, this house seems familiar to me. It seems to me that I have known the rooms, the passages, and the rest of the house for many, many days. I used to follow my own whims in everything I did. The master never interfered. You know that I became a member of the Sadharan Brahmo Samaj. Yes, I know that. Narendra, the master knew that women attended the meetings of the Brahmo Samaj. A man cannot meditate with women sitting in front of him. Therefore, he criticized the meditation of the Brahmo Samaj, but he did not object to my going there. But one day he said to me, don't tell Rakhal about your being a member of the Brahmo Samaj or he too will feel like becoming one. And you have greater strength of mind. That's why the master did not prevent your going to the Samaj. Narendra, I have attained my present state of mind as a result of much suffering and pain. You have not passed through any such suffering. I now realize that without trials and tribulations one cannot resign oneself to God and depend on Him absolutely. Narendra's ego. Well, X is so modest and humble. He is totally self effacing. Can you tell me how I can develop humility? M. Speaking about your ego, the master said, whose ego it is? Narendra. What did he mean? M. A friend one day said to Radhika, you are egotistic. That is why you insulted Krishna. Whereupon another friend said to the first, yes, Radhika is egotistic, no doubt, but whose ego is it? What she meant was that Radha was egotistic because she regarded Krishna as her Lord. It was Krishna himself who kept that ego in Radha. What the master meant was that it is God alone who has kept this ego in you so that he may accomplish many things through you. Narendra, but my ego loudly proclaims to all that I have no suffering. Am smiling, you may loudly proclaim it, if that be your sweet will. The conversation turned to other devotees. Narendra, the master said about Vijay Goswami, he is knocking at the door, and that is to say, he has not yet entered the room. At Shamapukur, Vijay said to the master, I saw you at Dhaka in this tangible form, in this very body. You were there too. Narendra, Devendra Babu and Ram Babu want to renounce the world. They are trying hard. Ram Babu told me privately that he would give up the world after 2 years. And after 2 years, after making provisions for his children, Narendra, besides, he will rent his present house and buy a small house. Other relatives will arrange his daughter's marriage. About Nitya Gopal. M. Gopal is in an exalted state of mind, is not he? Narendra, what do you mean? So much emotion, so much weeping, and such exaltation in the name of God. Narendra, does mere emotion makes a man spiritually great? Youngsters like Kali, Sarat, Sasi, and Sharda are more spiritual than Gopal. How great their renunciation is. Gopal not accept the master, does he? And that is true. The master remarked that Gopal did not belong to the circle of his devotees, but I saw him show great reverence for Sri Ramakrishna. Narendra, what did you see? At that time, I was just becoming acquainted with Sri Ramakrishna. One day after the meeting of the devotees in his room had broken up, I came out and saw Gopal on the footpath, kneeling with folded hands before the master. The moon was shining brightly overhead. It was the red path sprinkled with brick dust just outside the long veranda north of the master's room. Nobody else was there. It appeared to me that Gopal had taken shelter at Sri Ramakrishna's feet and the master was encouraging him. Narendra, I did not see it. And further, the master used to say, Gopal is in the state of Paramahamsa. But I also distinctly remember his forbidding Gopal to be intimate with women devotees. Many a time he warned him about it. Narendra, speaking to me about Gopal, the master asked why, if Gopal was a real Paramahamsa, he should hanker after money. He does not belong to this place. The master said, those who are my own will always come here. He used to be angry with tea because he was Gopal's constant companion and did not come to the master more often. Gopal has spiritual realizations, no doubt, the master said to me, but he has attained them all of a sudden without the necessary preparations. He is not one of my own. If he is, why have not wept for I wept for him? Some are proclaiming Gopal as the reincarnation of Nityananda, but times without number, the master said to me, in me alone are embodied Advaita, Chaitanya, and Nityananda. I am all these three. Friday, April 8, 1887. About 8 o'clock in the morning, two devotees, one a householder and the other a monk, were conversing in a room in the Badanagar monastery. When M came in, the devotees were of the same age, 24 or 25 years old. M intended to spend 3 days at the monastery. He went to the shrine and saluted two devotees who were engaged in conversation. The householder devotee wanted to renounce the world. The monk was trying to persuade him not to do so. Monk, why don't you finish the few duties you have in the world? Very soon they will be left behind. A man was told that he would go to the hell. He asked a friend, what is hell like? Thereupon the friend began to draw a picture of hell on the ground with a piece of chalk. No sooner was the picture drawn than the man rolled over it and said, now I have gone through hell. Householder, I don't relish worldly life. Ah, how happy you are here. Monk, why don't you renounce the world if you want to? Why do you talk about it so much? But I repeat, why don't you enjoy the fun once for all? Sasi finished the regular worship in the worship hall. About 11, the brothers of the mutt returned from the Ganges after taking their baths. They put on clean clothes, went to the shrine, prostrated themselves before the deity, and meditated there a little while. After the food was offered to the deities, they had their meal and ate with them. After the food was offered to the deity, they had their meal and ate with them. It was evening, incense was burnt before the pictures of gods and goddesses, and the evening service was performed. Rahal, Sasi, and Elder Gopal and Haris were seated in the big hall. Am also was there. Rakhal's reminiscence, Rakhal's reminiscences of the master. Rakhal warned one of the brothers to be careful about the food to be offered to the master in the shrine. Rakhal to Sasi and the others. One day I ate part of his, meaning the master's refreshments, before he took them. At this he said, I cannot look at you. How could you do such a thing? I burst into tears. The elder Gopal. One day at Kasipur, I breathed hard on his food. At this he said, take that food away. And Narendra were pacing the veranda and recalling old times. Narendra, I did not believe in anything. And you mean the forms of God? Narendra, at first I did not accept most of what the master said. One day he asked me, then why do you come here? I replied, I come here to see you, not to listen to you. And what did he say to that? Narendra, he was very much pleased. Saturday, April 1980, 1887. The master and Narendra. The members of the mutt were resting a little after their meal. Narendra and M sat under a tree in the garden to the west of the monastery. It was a solitary place and no one else was present. Narendra was recounting to M his various experiences with Sri Ramakrishna. Narendra was about 24 years old and M 32. And you must remember vividly your first visit to him. Narendra, yes, it was at the temple garden at Dakshineshwar in his own room that day. I sang two songs. Narendra sang them for M. Let us go back once more, O mind, to our own abode here in this foreign land of earth. Why should we wander aimlessly in strangers' guise? These living beings round about and the five elements are strangers to you, all of them, none is your own. Why do you thus forget yourself in love with strangers, O my mind? Why do you thus forget your own? Ascend the path of truth, O mind, unflaggingly climb with love as the lamp to light your way. As your provision for the journey, bring with you the virtues carefully concealed, for like to highwaymen, greed and delusion wait to rob you of wealth and keep beside you constantly as guards to shelter you from harm. Calmness of mind and self-control, companionship with holy men will be for you a welcome rest house by the road. There rest your weary limbs while asking your way. If ever you should be in doubt of him who watches there, if anything along the path should be frighten you, then loudly shout the name of the Lord, for he is ruler of that road, and even death must bow to him. O Lord, must all my days pass by so utterly in vain? Down the path of hope I gaze with longing day and night. Thou art the Lord of all the worlds, and I but a beggar here. How can I ask of thee to come and dwell within my heart? My poor heart's humble cottage door is standing open wide. Be gracious, Lord, and enter there but one and quench its thirst. And what did he say after listening to your songs, Narendra? He went into Samadhi. He said to Ram Babu, who is this boy? How well he sings. He asked me to come again. M. Where did you see him next? Narendra. At Raj Mohan's house. The third visit was at Dakshineshwar again. During that visit, he went into Samadhi and began to praise me as if I were God. He said to me, O Narayana, you have assumed this body for my sake, but please don't tell this to anybody else. And what else did he say? Narendra, he said, you have assumed this body for my sake. I asked the Divine Mother, unless I enjoy the company of some genuine devotees, completely free from women and gold, how shall I live on earth? Then he said to me, you came to me at night, woke me up and said, here I am, but I did not know anything of this. I was sound asleep in our Calcutta house. And in other words, you may be both present and absent at the same time. It is like God who is both formless and the endowed with form. Narendra, but you must not tell this to anyone else. At Kasipur, he transmitted his power to me. M. Did not it happen when you used to meditate before a lighted fire under a tree at the Kasipur garden house, Narendra? Yes, one day while meditating, I asked Kali to hold my hand. Kali said to me, when I touched your body, I felt something like an electric shock coming to my body. But you must not tell this to anybody here. Give me your promise. And there is a special purpose in his transmission of power to you. He will accomplish much work through you. One day the master wrote on a piece of paper, Narayan will teach people. Narendra, but I said to him, I won't do any such thing. Thereupon he said, your very bones will do it. He has given me charge of Sarat. Sarat is now yearning for God. The Kundalini is awakened in him, and he must be careful that dead leaves do not accumulate there. Perhaps you remember what the master used to say. In a lake, the fish make holes so that they may rest there. But if dead leaves accumulate in the holes, the fish do not go there. Narendra, the master used to call me Narayana. And yes, I know he did. Narendra, when he was ill, he would not allow me to pour water to wash his hands. At Kasipur, he said, now the key is in my hands. He will give up his body when he knows who he is. And did not he say it when you were in Nirvikalpa Samadhi? Narendra, yes, at that time it seemed to me I had no body, I felt only my fish. I was studying law at home to prepare for the examinations. Suddenly I said to myself, what am I doing? Did not it happen when the master was at Kasipur? Narendra, yes, like an insane person, I ran out of my house. He asked me, what do you want? I replied, I want to remain immersed in Samadhi. He said, what a small mind you have. Go beyond Samadhi. Samadhi is a very trifling thing. And yes, he used to say that Vijnana is the stage after Jnana. It is like going up and down the stairs after reaching the roof. Narendra, Kali has a craving for knowledge. I scold him for that. Is knowledge so easy to get? Let his bhakti first mature. The master told Tarak at Dakshineswar that emotion and bhakti are by no means the last word. And what other things did he say about you, Narendra? Once I said to him, the forms of God and things like that which you see in your visions are all figments of your imaginations. He had so much faith in my words that he went to the Divine Mother in the temple and told her what I had said to him. He asked her, are these hallucinations? Then afterwards he said to me, Mother told me that all these are real. Perhaps you remember that he said to me, when you sing, he who dwells here touching his chest like a snake hisses as it were, and then spreading his hood quietly holds himself steady and listens to your music. He has no doubt said many things about me, but what have I realized? Now you have put on the garb of Shiva, you cannot touch money. Do you remember the master's story? Narendra, please tell it to me. M. A Bahurupi disguised himself as Shiva and visited a house. The master of the house wanted to give him a rupee, but he did not accept it. Then the mendicant went home, removed his disguise, came back to the gentleman and asked for the rupee. Why didn't you accept it before? He was asked. He said, I was impersonating Shiva, a sannyasi. I could not touch money that time. When Narendra heard the story, he laughed a long while. And you have now put on the garb of a physician, as it were. You have become the guardian of these young men. Yours is the entire responsibility. You have to bring up the brothers of monastery. Narendra, whatever spiritual disciplines we are practicing here are in obedience to the Master's command. But it is strange that Ram Babu criticizes us for our spiritual practices. He says, we have seen him, what need have we of any such practice? M. Let people act according to their faith. Narendra. But the master asked us to practice sadhana. Master's love for Narendra. Narendra was against telling him about the master's love for him. Narendra was again telling him about the master's love for him. Narendra, how many times he prayed to the Divine Mother for my sake. After my father's death, when I had no food at home and my mother and sisters and brothers were starving too, the Master prayed to the Divine Mother to give me money. And yes, I know that you once told me, Narendra, but I did not get any money. The Master told me what the Divine Mother has said to him. He will get simple food and clothing. He will eat rice and dal. He loved me so much, but whenever an impure idea crept into my mind, he at once knew about it. When going around with another, sometimes I found myself in the company of evil people. On those occasions, the master could not eat any food from my hands. He could raise his hands only a little and could not bring it to his mouth. His mouth. On one such occasion, while he was ill, he brought his hand very close to his mouth, but it did not go in. He said to me, you are not yet ready. Now and then I feel great skepticism. At Baburam's house, it seemed to me that nothing existed, as if there were no such thing as God. And the master used to say that he too had passed through the mud. Both M and Narendra remained silent. Then M said, you are all indeed blessed.
You think of the masters day and night, Narendra, but how little it is. We do not yet feel like giving up the body because we have not realized God. It was night. Niranjan had just returned from Puri. The members of the Mutt and M greeted him with great joy. Niranjan was telling them his experiences. He was then about 5 years old, 25 years old. The evening worship was over. Some of the brothers were meditating, but many of them assembled in the big hall around Niranjan. They were talking. After 9 o'clock, Sasi offered food to the deity. The members of the mutt finished their supper, which consisted of homemade bread, a little vegetable, and a little hard molasses. Saturday, May 7, 1887. It was the full moon day of the month of Vaisakh. Narendra and M were seated on a couch in M's study in Calcutta. They were talking just before Narendra's arrival. M had been studying the Merchant of Venice, Comus, and Blackie's self-culture, which he taught at school. Narendra and the other brothers of the monastery were full of yearning for God realization. A fire of intense renunciation raised in their hearts. Narendra, I do not care for anything. You see, I am now talking with you, but I feel like getting up this minute and running away. Narendra sat in silence a few minutes. Then he said, I shall fast to death for the realization of God. M. That is good. One can do anything for God. Narendra, but suppose I cannot control my hunger. M. Then eat something and begin over again. Narendra remained silent a few minutes. Narendra, it seems there is no God. I pray so much, but there is no reply, none whatsoever. How many visions I have seen, how many mantras shining in letters of gold, how many visions of the goddess Kali, how many other divine forms, but still I have no peace. Will you kindly give me 6 pice? Narendra asked for the money to pay his carriage hire to the Badagaon Mutt. Just then Satkari arrived in a carriage of the same age as Narendra. He dearly loved the members of the monastery. He lived near the mutt and worked in Calcutta. The carriage was his own. Narendra returned the money to M and said that he would go with Sat- Satkari in his carriage. He asked M to give them some refreshments. M accompanied the two friends to the Bada Nagar Mutt. He wanted to see how the brothers spent their time and practiced sadhana. He wanted to see how Sri Ramakrishna, the master, was reflected in the hearts of the disciples. Niranjan was not at the mutt. He had gone home to visit his mother, the only relative he had in the world. Baburam, Sarath, and Kali had gone to Puri. They intended to spend a few days there.
Prasanna's austere sadhana. Narendra was in charge of the members of monastery. Prasanna had been practicing austere sadhana for the past few days. Once Narendra had told him of his desire to fast to death for the realization of God. During Narendra's absence in Calcutta, Prasanna had left the monastery for an unknown destination. When Narendra heard about it, he said to the brothers, "Why did Raja allow him to go?" But Rakhal had not been in the monastery at the time, having gone to the Dakshineswar temple for a stroll. Narendra, just let Raja come back to the monastery. I shall scold him. Why did he allow Prasanna to go away? To Harish, I am sure you were lecturing him. Then, standing with your feet apart, could not you prevent his going away? Harish replied in a very low voice. Brother Tarak asked him not to go, but still he went away. Narendra to M. You see what a lot of trouble I am in. Here too I am involved in world of Maya. Who knows where this boy has gone? Rahal returned from Dakshineswar. Bhavnath had accompanied him. Narendra told Rahal about Prasanna's going away from the monastery. Prasanna had left a letter for Narendra. This was the substance of the letter. I am going to Vrindavan on foot. It is very risky for me to live here. Here my mind is undergoing a change. Formerly I used to dream about my parents and other relatives. Then I dreamed of women, the embodiment of Maya. I have suffered twice. I had to go back to my relatives at home. Therefore, I am going far away from them. The master once told me, your people at home are apt to do anything, never trust them. Rahal said, these are the reasons for his going away. Once he remarked, Narendra often goes home to look after his mother, brothers, and sisters, and he supervises the family's lawsuit. I am afraid that I too may feel like going home following his example. Narendra remained silent. Rahal was talking to them about making pilgrimage. He said, we have achieved nothing by staying here. The Master always exhorted us to realize God. Have we succeeded? Rahal lay down. The other devotees were either lying down or sitting. Rahal, let us go to the Narmada. Narendra, what will you achieve by wandering about? Can one ever attain jnana that you are talking about it so much? A devotee, then a devotee. Then why have you renounced the world? Narendra, must we live with Sham because we have not seen Ram? Must we go on begetting children because we have not realized God? What are you talking about? Narendra went out, returning after a few minutes. Rakhal was still lying down. A member of the monastery who was also lying down said teasingly, feigning great suffering on account of his separation from God, ah, please get me a knife. I have no more use for this life. I can't stand this pain anymore. Narendra, feigning seriousness,
It is there. Stretch out your hand and take it. Everybody laughed. The conversation again turned to Prasanna. Narendra, even here we are involved in Maya. Why have we become sannyasis? I wonder. Rakhal, I have read in a book that sannyasis should not live together. The author has described a city of sannyasis. Sasi, I do not care about sannyasis or any such thing. There is no place where I cannot live. They were talking of Bhavnath, whose wife had been seriously ill. Narendra said to Rakhal, I understand that his wife has been snatched from the jaws of death. Is that why he went to Dakshineswar to enjoy the fresh air? Ram Babu intended to build a temple in the garden at Kankurgachi, where some of Sri Ramakrishna's ashes were buried. Narendra to Rahal. Ram Babu has made M one of the trustees of the garden. M to Rahal. But I don't know anything about it. It was dusk. Sasi burnt incense before the picture of Sri Ramakrishna in the worship room and then before the pictures of gods and goddesses in the other rooms. The evening worship began. The members of the mutt and the other devotees stood with the folded hands near the door of the shrine and witnessed the arti. Then they all sang in chorus the following hymn to Shiva to the accompaniment of bell and gong. Jaya Shiva Omkara, Bhaj Shiva Omkara, Brahma Vishnu Sadashiva, Hara 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 Mahadeva. Narendra had introduced this song for the evening worship. It is sung in the temple of Shiva in Banaras. It was 11 o'clock at night when their supper was over. The brothers prepared a bed for M and all went to sleep. It was midnight. M was wide awake. He said to himself, everything as it was before. The same Ayodhya, only Rama is not there. M silently left his bed. It was the full moon night of Vaisakh, the thrice blessed day of the Buddhist, associated with Buddha's birth, realization, and passing away. M was walking alone on the bank of the Ganges, contemplating the Master. It was Sunday. M had arrived the day before and was planning to stay till Wednesday. The householder devotees generally visited the monastery on Sundays. The Yoga Vasishtha was being studied and explained. M had heard a little about the teachings of this book from Sri Ramakrishna. It taught the absolute identity of Brahma and the soul and the unreality of the world. The master had forbidden him and the other household devotees to practice spiritual discipline following the method of the Advaita Vedanta, since the attitude of the oneness of the soul and God is harmful for one still identified with the body. For such a devotee, the master used to say it was better to look on God as the Lord and oneself as his servant. The conversation turned to the Yoga Vasishtha. Well, how is Brahmagana described in the Yoga Vasishtha? Rahal. Hunger, thirst, pain, pleasure, and so on are all Maya. The annihilation of the mind is the only means to the realization of Brahma. M. What remains after the annihilation of the mind is Brahma. Is that not true? Rahal, yes. M. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that Nagata taught him that way. Have you found in the book that Vasishtha asked Rama to lead a householder's life? Rahal, I have not yet found anything like that in the book. Rama is not even admitted by the author to be an incarnation of God. Presently, Narendra, Tarak, and another devotee returned from the bank of the Ganges. They had intended to go to Kon Nagar on the other side of the river but had been unable to find a ferry boat. They sat down. The conversation about the yoga Vasishtha went on. Narendra to M. There are many nice stories in the book. Do you know the incident of Leela? Yes, I have read the book here and there. Leela had attained Brahmagana. Narendra, yes. Do you remember the story of Indra and Ahilya and the story of how King Vidratha became a Chandala? Yes, I remember. Narendra, what a wonderful description of the forest. Narendra and the other devotees were going to the Ganges to bathe and accompanied them. The sun was very hot, so M took his umbrella. Sarat, a devotee from Badagaon, Badanagar, was going with them to take his bath. He often visited the monastery. M to Sarat, it is very hot. Narendra, is that your excuse for taking the umbrella? M laughed. The members of the monastery were clad in Gerwa. M to Narendra, it is really very hot. One is liable to get a sunstroke. Narendra, I see that your body is the obstacle in your path of renunciation. Is not that so? I mean, Devendra Babu. I mean you, Devendra Babu. And M laughed and said to himself, is it merely the body? After bathing, the devotees returned to the monastery. They washed their feet and entered the worship room. Saluting the deity, they offered flowers. Narendra was a little late in coming to the worship room. He found that there was no flower on the tray. There were only a few bay leaves. He sprinkled the leaves with the sandal paste and offered them to Sri Ramakrishna. He rang the bell, saluted the deity again, and joined the other brothers in the big hall which was known as the room of the Danas. The members of the mutt called themselves the Danas and the Daityas, which means the ghosts and the demons. The companions of Shiva. They took these names because of their utter indifference to worldly pleasures and relationships. The southernmost room of the second floor was used for meditation, contemplation, and study and was known as Kali Tapasvi's room since Kali used to shut himself in these most of the day. North of this room was the worship room, and north of that again was the room where the offerings for the worship were prepared.
From this room, the devotees used to watch the evening worship. North of the offerings room was the room of the Danas, a very long hall where the members of the mutt used to assemble. Here the householders, devotees, and visitors were received. North of this hall was a small room where the devotees took their meals. East of the worship room and of Kali Tapasvi's room ran a long veranda at the southwest corner of which was the library of a society of Badanagar. Between Kali Tapasvi's room and this library was a staircase, and north of the dining room was another staircase leading to the roof. Narendra and the other members of the mutt often spent their evenings on this roof. There they devoted a great deal of time to discussion of the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna, Sankaracharya, Ramanuja and Jesus Christ, and of Hindu philosophy, European philosophy, the Vedas, the Puranas and the Tantras. Narendra, who had a beautiful voice, used to sing in the room of the Danas and teach music to Surat and a few others. Kali used to take lessons on the instruments. Many happy hours they spent together in that hall, dancing and singing. Narendra was sitting with the devotees in the room of the Danas. The conversation turned to religious preaching. I conclude this video. Next video number 58 will start with chapter number 52, Vidyasagar's reluctance about preaching. Next video number 53 will start with the chapter next video number 58 will start with the chapter number 52, Vidyasagar's reluctance about preaching. Thank you for watching this video. Namaskar.